Welcome back to the Road to Manchester Marathon series. It's now episode 4 and with just 3 weeks to go to the Manchester Marathon, I'll be looking at doing another sort of similar mileage week with a couple of sessions in before then tapering down into the last couple of weeks before the marathon. Joining me today on my Tuesday lunch run, which is my first run since Ashby 20 on Sunday. So I'm still incredibly content with the result at Ashby. It's a real big confidence booster, as I said in previous week's video, going into the marathon. But I finished sort of 4 minutes up on what I knew was marathon pace for the 20 miles. So I know I'm comfortably able to run quicker than my marathon pace and over hills, which is a real confidence in my fitness and my training this block. I'm going to talk to you about my fueling plan for Manchester Marathon, so in terms of how many gels I'm going to have, what sort of things I'm going to be doing in there. But before I can, I'm just going to go over a short explanation in as simple terms as I can about how fueling works when we're running and why we need to take on gels and nutrition throughout the marathon. So in simple terms, when we go for a run, we mainly use carbohydrates as energy. Running at slower paces, you use fats as energy, but for this purpose, when we're doing sort of racing and going for PBs, going for marathon efforts, you'll probably be ticking over more into the carbohydrate side of things. So, and the issue with marathon fueling, you can probably get away with it not fueling so much for quicker runners and if you're doing shorter distances, because it only really kicks in at maybe 90 minutes where you need to, if you're running for longer than 90 minutes, you'll need to be fueling appropriately for this, and that's because that's when we run out of carbohydrate stores. So we've got an initial store of carbohydrates that can come from sort of bread, pasta, rices, potatoes, that sort of food, sort of slow release carbohydrates, not the carbohydrates like sugars. So that will be stored, eventually it will be broken down to users into a form of energy called ATP, and that is then used to give energy to the muscles so that we can perform activity in running. So when we think of the amount of time we're going to be doing a marathon, so in my case I'm aiming around about 3 hours of exercise. So I know that when I get to halfway and I've not had any carbohydrates, any fueling, I'll start to struggle and I won't have the energy to get to the line, and that's where the term of, say, bunking comes, that you'll run out of energy and struggle and have to run walk to the finish. So to prevent this, what we try and do is take on some simple carbohydrates in the form of glucose, which is ready available and quicker to break down than taking, for example, eating your bread, pasta and rice. You wouldn't be doing that in a race. So that's why we have gels, sports drinks. You can have them in chew versions, which are quite good, just to provide you with that simple sugar throughout the race. And they'll have different amounts of carbohydrates on the packet. So most gels are typically start at about 20 grams, but you can get bigger gels that have about 40 grams of sugar, carbohydrates, energy in. So roughly on my marathon effort, I know that I try and get about 3 or 4 of those 40 gram carbohydrate energy in over the course of a marathon. I know some manufacturers might recommend more, but remember they are in the business of trying to sell gels as well, and I think the research does point to having more and more, but then the other factor is that your stomach can only take so much, especially when you're running at a marathon effort as well. So there's a little trade-off of you want to get enough energy in, but you also don't want to suffer from runner's tummy in the middle of your marathon, which can't be pleasant when you've still got an hour to go. You're struggling on that front, so there's a little bit of a trade-off there in the gels, and I'll go over that in a bit more detail later on. The other thing to mention with fueling is that it is completely personal to you, how you fuel. People will react differently to, say, gels. Some people might prefer solids, or some people might prefer the drink. So, and depending on the amount of carbs you can take on and process during a race. So I'm just giving sort of my ideas, what's worked for me, but it is good to go out and practice what works for you. Train your stomach to take on, because the more energy you can take on, the better, really, because you're going to have a full tank at the end of a race. So it is almost like another element of your training, how you build your long run up to, say, 20 miles going into your marathon. You want to be probably training your stomach up from taking a couple of gels to taking 4 gels, for example, and by the end of your training block. And it's often something that I think is, we fall into one of two camps in the fueling. But camp one is of sort of a blissful ignorance of not really knowing anything about it, not really practicing the fueling, and just hoping it works on the day. Or I suppose there's the other camp at the other extreme, that you'll analyse to the minute detail how many grams you're having, and probably get a little bit anxious and worked up over that. So I like to try and sit somewhere in the middle, have a rough idea on how much I need to take, but not ignore completely the fact that I do need to fuel to have that energy to take me through the marathon.
So Wednesday morning's run was a 5.5 mile run around the Washlands, which is one of my regular loops. You'll have seen it feature regularly on the channel. I have actually compiled some of the clips from this video in a places I like to run version of the Washlands, so be sure to check that out if you're interested.
Good morning and happy Thursday. So I'm out on my first of 2 runs today on Thursday. My training's been a little bit different this week, with not running Monday, only having the 1 run on Tuesday. I've been double daying on the Wednesday and the Thursday. So yesterday's run was similar to this one, just a 5.5, 6 mile easy run in the morning. And then going into the evening yesterday, it was good to have a catch up with Sam Harrison. We did 10 miles steady run at 7:15s, and she's going to Berlin this weekend to do the half there, so I think she'll do really well there. She's going really well over sort of 10k in the half, so I think she'll get a good time, probably quite close to her PB, which she did there last year. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how she does on Sunday. And in terms of my training for the rest of the week, I'm going to go with, I've got sort of an 8 mile run tonight, which I've set Robbie a progression run. I'm going to join him on that one. And then Friday, I'm going to do a bit of a long run session myself in the morning, because I won't be running Saturday because I'm in London for the day. And then 15 miles on Sunday. So let's see how that pans out for the rest of the week.
To update on Sunday after the race, so I was right with saying Sam would have a good run. She had an incredible run of 67.17, which was nearly a minute off her PB and puts her 4th all-time for the UK half marathon. The rest of the results from the race, the headlines probably took by Ailish McColgan, who won in 1:05.43, which is a new British record. And also a big shout out, well done to Calli Thackery, who's a good friend of Sam's and her training partner, who ran a PB of 69.01 and finished in 6th place at this race. So a great day out for British women's running at the half in Berlin. Thursday evening's run, I was joined by good company. So we had Steve, Jacob and Robbie, as you can see on screen there. We went through a sort of progression session, which is still a pretty easy run, but something where we did 20 minutes easy, 20 minutes steady, and then 20 minutes a bit faster. So just making an easy run a little bit more exciting there. Friday's session was a tempo run. Originally I'd planned to do 3 lots of 3 miles. Turned out to be 3 lots of 2 miles in the end. As it was going off the back of Wednesdays and Thursdays, doing big double days, sort of 16 miles over 2 runs in both days there. I did want to get a bit of a session in this week because I hadn't really done one as such. But that tempo probably proved a step too far and I couldn't really hit the paces that I wanted to. I got on the second mile of that first rep of that 3 miles, and then was starting to feel that I couldn't really hit that 7-minute mile pace, which was outside of my marathon pace. So I did decide to dial it back a bit, have a bit of recovery, change the session up, and looking back at the splits, it was still a pretty decent run. I was able to get 6 miles of effort in at very close to marathon pace. So I'll take that on tired legs, and then heading into the weekend, had Saturday off as a day in London, a lot of travelling that day, and then hit the 15 miles with the lads on Sunday. So a little bit of a struggle on Sunday as I was a bit tired, but managed to get 15 miles at 7:30s on quite a hilly route. So really pleased with that to round off the week. In terms of the structure of the week, a little bit mixed again this week, but I did get 64 miles in just under, so I'm happy with getting the mileage in. Probably would have liked to do a little bit more on the session front, as I did get that tempo, but not until Friday. It was a little bit of a mixed up week again because of starting without the Monday run, then pushed me over to Tuesday's run, double day on Wednesday and Thursday, and again not really only getting the 1 session in. So I would like to try and get a couple of sessions in midweek next week, but I'm also trying to drop down the mileage a bit. So this would have been probably one of my peak mileage weeks of 64 miles. I'll look to do around 50 or so miles next week if I can do. But what I might do is try and run on that Monday will help me out to get a bit of mileage in the week and set my structure off for the week better. Thanks again for watching episode 4. I hope the fueling advice has been useful on this episode, and look forward to checking in with you again for episode 5. It's just 2 weeks until Manchester Marathon now.